going to call this meeting to order and start with a roll call.
Mendoza.
Here.
Hilpern.
Here.
Chow.
Here.
Tanya Vudi.
Here.
Hernandez.
Here.
Partha.
Here. If we can, Rebecca, if you can take the motion for the approval of the meeting agenda.
Yes, I move that the Board of Education move, oh, is this the right one?
Number 4.
No. I move that the Board of Education approve tonight's meeting agenda as presented.
Second.
Hilpern.
Yes.
Chow.
Yes.
Tanya Vudi.
Yes.
Hernandez.
Yes.
Mendoza.
Yes.
Partha.
Yes. So we will start off tonight's meeting with our high five recognition.
And I'm going to go to the podium to do this to make it a little easier. Good evening. I'm Paul Gorin, and I live at 1109. No. 1109 Main. I want to welcome everyone tonight. This past October, District 65 launched an exciting new program to recognize our licensed staff members and our educational support staff members who continually go above and beyond the call of duty in support of their colleagues, students, and our families. This program was designed with the goal of publicly acknowledging the incredibly dedicated members of our team and to engage the community in the important work happening throughout our school district each and every day. Tonight, we have the pleasure of congratulating and recognizing 2 more recipients. Ms. Maria Alvarez, kindergarten teacher at Dawes Elementary, as the recipient in our licensed staff category, and Ms. Edna Johnson, special education paraprofessional at Orienton Elementary in the educational staff category. And please join me in a round of applause. We're going to be doing several rounds of applause, so just get used to it a little bit. We continue to receive heartfelt and very personal nominations for staff members across District 65. I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to submit a nomination, and we look forward to the opportunity to recognize 2 more staff members each month throughout May, all the way through May. Before we begin, I want to to thank and offer my sincere appreciation to First Bank and Trust for their generous contribution and sponsorship of the High Five program. I'd like to invite Paul Kogel, who's Senior Vice President, to come up and join me in recognizing our recipients. Through First Bank and Trust sponsorship, we've been able to provide our staff members with well-deserved recognition without using any district funds. Our recipients will receive a Visa gift card, a frame recognition certificate, and will be invited to a celebratory luncheon for all of this year's recipients later on in May. And Paul, again, thank you so much on behalf of District 65 to First Bank and Trust.
You're very welcome. It's our pleasure.
So I'd like to kick off by inviting Ms. Alvarez to come join us, if you would. And Alvarez is one of our dedicated educators and currently teaches some of our youngest learners, our kindergartners at Dawes Elementary. Ms. Alvarez received several nominations by 2 parents at Dawes, Ms. Nora Bondi and Mr. Martin Laffey. Unfortunately, they cannot be here this evening due to prior commitments, but they've asked that I share some comments on their behalf. Ms. Bondi wrote a compelling nomination sharing that, quote, "A few weeks into the school year, my first grader received a letter in the mail, which is a big deal when you're 6. It was a beautiful letter from her kindergarten teacher, with several printed photographs of my daughter and her friends from throughout the kindergarten year. We were both so touched by this gesture. It truly made us feel like part of the school family. When the love of the school and the love of learning is instilled at a kindergarten level, it carries with it feelings of home and safety as well. What a nurturing place Dawes is for the mind and the spirit. Thank you, Ms. Alvarez." As part of the nomination, Mr. Laffey wrote, quote, "As an educator myself, I've been so impressed with Ms. Alvarez from day one in terms of the welcoming climate she creates for all of the students in her classroom. I know that my son has greatly benefited from the attention she manages to give to each child, as well as her ability to manage classroom behavior effectively in a positive manner. He loves to come to school and be in her classroom. She effectively teaches the curriculum while also developing the students' confidence and social skills. I have noticed Ms. Alvarez's effectiveness as a teacher when I see her interact with other parents and students from the classroom during drop-off and pickup. As an ESL teacher for the kindergarten, she does a remarkable job of searching out parents who might need clarification on things that others of us might take for granted. I specifically saw her have to struggle, but managed to find ways to succeed in communicating to a new parent who did not speak English about the fact that there was an early dismissal day last month. For many of us who are kindergarten parents, it is our first experience with the District 65 schools, and it can be very nervous, and it can be a very nervous and vulnerable transition. Ms. Alvarez has made this a wonderful transitional experience for our family. Ms. Alvarez is doing a fantastic job, and that is apparent from the nominations submitted on her behalf. I'd like to ask Board President Carta to join us as we present Ms. Alvarez with her gift card and certificate. Ms. Alvarez, thank you for all that you do for the students of District 65 and for Dawes Elementary. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep. Congratulations. As I said, we do a lot of clapping and cheering here. I'd like to now invite Ms. Edna Johnson and Ms. Gloria Iverson to the podium. Ms. Johnson is a paraprofessional who works in support of our special needs students at Orrington Elementary. She has received 3 separate nominations from her colleagues who have witnessed firsthand her dedication and commitment to her students. She was nominated by Chris Brigson, Katie Sweeney, and Gloria Iverson. And I'd like to ask Ms. Iverson to come to the mic to say a few words.
I've worked with Edna Johnson for almost 10 years, and every day has been special. The miracle is not that we do this work, but that we are happy to do it. Edna brings light and joy to the students and staff that she works with, that Edna works with quietly. Edna quietly works through her lunch and her break times. Most of the staff does not even realize that she is not assigned to their students. When I feel tired or ask why should I do more, I just have to look over at Edna and know that I can do more. Thank you, Edna. You inspire me to work harder every day. May the Lord grant us the wisdom to seek that which is worthwhile and to love not with our words, but with our actions. And Edna does that every single day.
Mr. Brigson and Ms. Sweeney could not be here this evening, but I'd like to offer a few remarks shared as part of their nominations. Mr. Brigson wrote in part, quote, Mrs. Johnson does an excellent job of going above and beyond for not just her students, but the other students in my class. She helps to aid special education students, but also takes the time to help general education students and English as a second language students as well. She takes it upon herself to work with students one-on-one and in small groups. She will do anything you ask of her and do it with enthusiasm. She gets to know my kindergarten students on a personal level, jokes around with them, redirects them when needed, and offers help when asked. My students look for help from her as well. She is not just seen as another adult in the room. Mrs. Johnson has garnered that respect from my students, which shows her resolve as an educator. Finally, she is part of the community. She personally knows families that come through the special education program and is truly a valued member of our staff. Ms. Sweeney shared that, quote, Edna goes above and beyond to create relationships with her students and fellow staff members. She intuitively knows what her students need and helps students to negotiate both academic and social situations. She supports her students with a kind and direct demeanor. We thought it was very impressive that 3 individual members, including Ms. Iverson, of the Orienton team, took the time to submit nominations on behalf of Ms. Johnson. This is a testament to the amazing job that you are doing and the impact that you have not only on your students, but on all colleagues. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for all that you do. And Ms. Carta, can you join us again for a presentation as we recognize Ms. Edna Johnson for everything that she does for District 65. Off to our absolutely fabulous staff and teaching staff, and many, many thanks to First Bank and Trust for helping us in this, and we will continue throughout the months of the new year.
It's the best 17 minutes of board meeting we've had yet.
Congratulations to our high five recipients. Next item on our agenda, we have a presentation from Foundation 65.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diane Lacroix. I'm here on behalf of the Board of Foundation 65, and with me tonight is Lisa Gino. She is our Executive Director. Thank you for the opportunity to acknowledge a very large group of very special educators who, like Ms. Alvarez, are deeply invested in their children's futures. We've included a letter in your packet tonight thanking all of District 65's kindergarten and first grade teachers, along with reading specialists, special education teachers, and principals who are putting their energy behind shifts in curriculum and instructional practice to better support the diverse learners who enter their classrooms. And you guys know very well that the skills of the kids entering those kindergarten classrooms go across the board. All the kids are amazing, but the skills that they walk in with can be very different. Foundation 65 knows this effort I'm going to talk about as Project REACH. That's sort of in our funding model. And we learned recently about some early successes and wanted to share some good news here tonight. And there are early successes in raising achievement in the area of literacy readiness. The work I'm referring to targets our youngest learners, and especially those who enter kindergarten not yet having the skills that will allow them to flourish as readers. Project REACH incorporates professional learning, in-class instructional coaching, and a specific volunteer-based intervention called Kindergarten Literacy Partners that brings community members in. And as one of those community members, it is the most fun volunteer opportunity that I have taken on in a while, working with kindergartners. Teachers have really risen to this opportunity to work really hard for kids who have been historically underserved. All kindergarten and first grade teachers have participated in regular professional development sessions, and a remarkable 70% of them signed up for voluntary in-class instructional coaching. 70% of our teachers, our very, very busy teachers, opting into this, I think is a credit to District 65 and this program. Experienced, successful District 65 teachers are leading the charge. This isn't something that is coming from outside. It's trusted people inside the district who are coaching their peers, developing videos to share instructional practice, hosting collaboratives to keep principals up to date, and piloting an intervention for children who come to school without the benefit of extensive oral language and pre-literacy skills development, to really bring for those kids what they need to thrive as readers and learners. We were very excited to get a report that after the first year of the Project REACH grant, outcomes improved overall for kindergarten and first grade students on these pre-literacy measures. Especially heartening, though, were strong results for Black students and those identified as not kindergarten ready. I'm going to put in parentheses here a note that I use not kindergarten ready as a shorthand, just as the district does. If you are 5, by law, you are kindergarten ready. Right? That's when kindergarten needs to be serving you. There are many measures of readiness. This is a pre-literacy measure. Sorry to digress. It's just one of those things that we talk about a lot, especially at Cradle to Career. In this particular set of pre-literacy measures, there was good news about historically underserved children being better prepared to read. There was a comparison of what percent of students in a group were meeting benchmarks in spring 2017 as compared to a 5-year baseline. And for all children, it was up, a little bit is good, but there was an 11.8% increase in the percentage of Black kindergarten students meeting those benchmarks, which was fabulous to see. Fabulous. There was an 11.1% in the increase in the percentage of children identified by the district as not kindergarten ready who were meeting those benchmarks. We were delighted to hear that news. As we noted in our letter, there are lessons to be learned. Other subgroups could use more help and support, and there are improvements to be made. But this was year 1. And shifts in instructional practice take time, they take dedication, they take persistence, they take the kind of equity lens that I think the board is using and make it meaningful. There's good news here, and we are incredibly thankful and want to say specifically to all those educators, we're so proud to be partnering with you in making good things happen. We really look forward to seeing the continued impact of this particular early investment, because we all have to hope that those early investments in our youngest learners are going to have, that's going to have legs, and that's going to carry forward. And we're looking forward to partnering with District 65 as we continue.
We also wanted to extend our thanks beyond the kindergarten and first grade teachers who are involved in Project REACH, who Diane mentioned. We at Foundation 65 are fortunate to have the opportunity to partner and support outstanding and dedicated educators at every single school in our district. And it's really an honor to be able to work closely with them and to support the work that they do every day. As you may know, Foundation 65 is a grant-making organization, and our sole focus is to raise money to support innovative projects and programs that benefit and improve the educational experience of District 65 students. But it's only with the support of the community, individuals, families, local businesses, community partners, that we're able to do this work. And this is a community that deeply believes in public education. Since 2008, thanks to community support, Foundation 65 has invested over $2.5 million in literacy and arts programming in District 65. This year alone, Foundation 65 is providing more than $275,000 in grants in initiatives that will impact every school within District 65. This, of course, includes REACH, but it also includes a multi-year project that supports Poetry Slam for students across all middle schools. And that project is called Evanston Speaks Youth Poetry Project. It also includes several one-year projects that connect local artists and nonprofits with our teachers and students. Partners that include the Musical Offering, Evanston Public Library, Lake Dance, Art Encounter, Open Studio Project, Mudlark Theater, Books and Breakfast. Really, it's amazing that that we have so many partners that are eager and enthusiastic about supporting our students. And of course, we continue to support the summer reading program for rising second graders. We are deeply grateful to all of our donors and our partners, but of course, none of our investments matter if we don't have dedicated and committed educators who are willing to work with us. And so, on behalf of the Foundation 65 Board of Directors, thank you to all the District 65 educators, administrators, and support staff. It is our privilege to partner with all of you and to have the chance to improve and enrich the educational experience for our students. Thank you.
And we should mention the date of our event.
And, as a shameless plug, our fundraising event, My 65, is on January 26th at Smiley Brothers, and we really hope to see all you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa and Diane, and Foundation 65 as a whole. I know we're lucky to have a number of community partners that we work with, but Foundation 65 is really a truly special organization that we're lucky. I know that in the past, Dr. Gorin and Dr. Beardsley have talked often about how when they have an idea and they come and talk to you about it, beyond just being open to the idea, you're enthusiastic and have ideas of your own of how to make it even better. So we're lucky to have that kind of partnership. So thank you so much for all you do with this program and with other programs throughout the district.
Yeah, and let me also echo just the heartfelt thanks to all of the donors and everybody who makes up Foundation 65 and District 65. And it's really also really exciting to see as you've documented the progress that children are making through your investments, and as they transition into our classrooms, the kids, and as they're really going through what has been a buttressed program on literacy, that we're working together in this, and that our leading indicators are showing progress and progress for children of color, progress for District 65 students, and that's just so important. And we couldn't be doing this without you, so thank you so very much.
With that, we will move on to superintendent and board remarks.
Yep, so I have a few. Let me start with holiday greetings to everyone who is watching, and to all of our educators. As we all know, on Friday, December 22nd, we will be taking the much-needed winter break, and we will look forward to welcoming back all of our students and our families on January 8th, 2018. I want to offer warm holiday greetings and New Year greetings to all of our children and all of our family members and all of our educators, and deep thanks for the work that we do day in and day out here in the district. I'd like to comment on two other things, and I'll combine a couple of things that were on the agenda. But I do want to make some comments about lead testing in District 65 schools, as that issue has come to the fore. As many people know, legislation was passed in Illinois earlier this year that requires pre-K through 5th grade schools and daycares built earlier than 2000 to conduct testing for lead contamination in water. As of December 11th, District 65 has received the results from testing completed at all K-5 and magnet schools. While not required, testing will be conducted in our middle schools after winter break. Testing was completed in November by Stantec, a certified environmental testing firm. The sampling was completed in compliance with new regulations set forth by the Illinois Department of Public Health and through the legislation that was passed by the Illinois legislature. Letters with the school level results and next steps were sent to K-5 and magnet school staff and families in early December. Detailed reports are posted on each and every one of our schools' websites. Any fixtures that showed lead levels in excess of the recommended level that was recommended by the United States Environmental Protection Agency were shut down and will remain off until the issue is addressed and water is retested. That recommended level is 5 parts per billion. While we've been doing this work, District 65 and the Evanston Health and Human Services Department are working collaboratively. As required by public law, District 65 notified the Illinois Department of Public Health of the results. We are currently implementing mitigation strategies as recommended by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Evanston Department of Health and Human Services. These strategies include the identification, replacement, and installation of new filters, fixtures, and identified pipes. Upon completion, we will do further testing to ensure compliance with the state guidelines. Several resources are listed on our website for those families who have issues or concerns, and they were included in the letters that we sent out. The environmental health and safety of our students and staff is of great importance to all of us. The district will continue to be responsive towards any concerns regarding environmental health and will continue to comply with all state and federal laws regarding lead testing. District 65 we will host an information session for staff and families in conjunction with the with the Evanston Health Department. District 65 and the Evanston Health Department will host a information session this Wednesday, December 20th at 6:30 p.m. here at the JEH Center, 1500 McDaniel Avenue. And let me repeat again, we will be hosting with the Evanston Health Department on December 20th, which is Wednesday of this week at 6:30, an information session to be able to talk about these issues. A final thing, and Raphael, you can help me on this as well, as we do the mitigation strategies, so we immediately, when we got the results back, if the results exceeded 5 parts per billion in any fountain or faucet, and these were primarily in faucets, we immediately shut those faucets down. And the couple fountains that were actually attached to faucets. We have been going through the process of what we're calling mitigation, which is to replace the faucets and to make them fully operable. And we will have that project done before the new year.
Yes.
Do I have that right?
We actually started the mitigation process at Lincoln Elementary School on the 10th of December. And we're going ahead for all the mitigation to be completed by the 5th of January. And then we'll proceed with testing on the 13th of January, retesting of those mitigated water sources. And the plan is to have the result of the mitigated water sources completed and provided to us by February 5th of next year to share with the family and the community.
And the obvious point is we won't make those sinks operative even with new equipment, until we have the test results back so we can ensure that the test results show levels at 5 parts per billion or below.
That's correct.
And again, just as a reminder, the session this Wednesday will be here at JEH, 1500 McDaniel Avenue, at 6:30 p.m. with the Director of Public Health for the City of Evanston. And I'll be there as well. And Raphael will be there as well.
Thank you for that update. Do any board members have any comments?
I just had a question about the lead testing and the process. To the best of your knowledge, is this a pretty common thing that's going on since the law passed in Illinois for lead testing in schools that are about the age of our buildings?
Yes, and the testing is required by law, so all school districts have to have this work done before the end of this calendar year. And results must be posted, especially if the results exceed the recommended levels, must be posted for the public to see, and then must be posted with the Illinois Department of Public Health. So I would expect that we will hear more of these stories as well.
Thank you.
And for anyone who is unable to attend on Wednesday, are there other opportunities to receive the information that's going to be presented?
We'll look and see if we can do a video presentation. Many times when we do that, with apologies that the quality doesn't get to be the level that we wish, but we can see, and we'll make sure that we have the materials that we'll be giving out as well. And we'll talk to Avonda Thomas Smith on whatever we've presented with her before, and if she has materials that she's presented, we'll make sure that those are available as well.
So I just wanted to thank the Lincoln Kindness Dolphin Club for these awesome cards that were presented to us today. Very nice, welcoming touch to our final board meeting for the school year. I also had the pleasure to sit in on the December 5th PTA Council meeting, and I just wanted to thank all the PTA representatives that were there, but most specifically all the parent members that are part of the Green Team initiatives at each individual school. I learned a great deal about a lot of all parent-driven Green Team initiatives, and I think that there's definitely a place for everybody to get involved in that initiative. And I did also want to invite the public to their very first Green Team meeting, which is scheduled for Wednesday, January 17th at 6:30 p.m. At the Civic Center, the Lighthouse Conference Room. So again, just thank you to all the incredible parents who are doing a great job in making sure that environmental sustainability is present at and actually not all the schools. So only several schools have green teams, but the individuals that do set up the green team have offered help to any school that's willing and able to start a green team. So just wanted to share. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, and then do we have an equity update?
Yeah, yes, we do. What I wanted to do is just spend a few minutes and reflect on our work on equity and racial equity that we've been embarking on for almost 2 years now. And let me start by, again, highlighting the obvious, that this work is ultimately focused on how we give opportunities for all children, and especially our children of color, to succeed at the highest levels here in the district. We're focused on changing the racial predictability of performance and in honoring and highlighting the assets that Black and Latinx children bring with them to our classrooms. We are focusing on creating a critical mass of staff members who participate in training that focuses on understanding one's racial identity and then understanding the racial identities of our students and our families. And we are working diligently on expanding our culturally relevant teaching strategies to reflect the various cultural backgrounds that make up District 65. When I look at District 65 over the last 18 months to 2 years, I see us making necessary progress with much more work to come. We remain committed to being transparent in our presentation of performance data, and we will continue to do that as we move forward. We know that our equity efforts are important, and because of that, the board itself has included the development and dissemination of a district-wide racial and educational equity statement and policy. We know that we need to identify and hire more teachers and principals of color. Over the past 3 years, we've been successful in expanding the diversity of our principal corps, with 6 out of 8 principals hired being people of color and specifically Black. With our teacher hires, we're making progress as it relates to hiring Black educators. In 2014-15, 10%, which was 5, of our new hires were Black educators. In 2015-16, 5% of new hires were Black. In 16-17, 10%, which was 6, of our new educators were Black. And in this year, 15% of our new educators were Black. So we really have moved from hiring at a rate of 5% to 10% to 15% over the past 3 years. This has to improve, yet we did achieve our goal of increasing the hiring of people of color by 10% annually. In the past year, we've made tremendous progress on 2 long-standing challenges to equity in the district. We worked to detrack our algebra offerings to eliminate the Algebra 8 class, which had enrolled primarily students of color, and now we offer the same high-level Algebra 1 class to all our students. And just earlier this month, the board and the administration the administration recommended and the board approved the expansion of our TWE programming, something that was needed to be done years ago so that our Latinx English language learners could have the proper programming to advance their acquisition of English. In the past 2 years, we've gone from 3 staff members who had participated in racial identity training through the Beyond Diversity programming to almost 400 staff members who have engaged in Beyond Diversity and nearly 200 who have participated in SEED training. This includes board members and me who are currently involved in SEED. We are also proceeding on our work on within our curriculum and instruction department on culturally relevant teaching. Department leads and coaches are engaging in a series of 6 professional learning sessions currently to equip them to incorporate culturally relevant teaching strategies into our curriculum, our professional development, our coaching, and into the further development of curriculum. We opened the school year with inspiring sessions by Dr. David Stovall and Dr. Jackie Pacalaria on how we must focus on race, the history of whiteness in our society, and the importance of having courageous conversations to ensure that we are truly focused on improving opportunities and outcomes for students of color. Our work will continue full speed with the new year, with a commitment from the board, my team, and educators throughout the district. Our children and our families in Evanston and Skokie deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about the equity update? Okay, well, thank you very much for that. We will move on to our first and only discussion item, which is our opening of schools report.
Public comment?
We missed public comment.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, we can do that. So, Tara, you want to come on up? Yeah. No, that's fine. I inadvertently skipped it from the agenda. So.
Hi, I'm Terry Shepard. I live at 150 Barton Avenue, not a stranger to the board. I would like to first congratulate this Foundation 65 on all the work they're doing. I served on that board so long that they had to rewrite the bylaws to get me out of there. But I served so long because I truly believe that everything that the foundation did would benefit the lives of African American students. And if you've heard me over the years, you know that that's my passion, academic excellence for African American students, and I truly believe the foundation works toward that, every program they have. But I'm here tonight to address some past comments made by Anya. Excuse me. I didn't think I was going to break down. First of all, I'm sorry that it took me so long to come here to speak to you about this, but you cried one night you were here, and you blamed it on the fact that you were pregnant, that your Black Lives Matter signs had been stolen, and then on the lack of African American student achievement. You sat right there, and you cried for quite a while, and it reminded me of, as I said, at the beginning of my comments, I've been coming here for years discussing the lack of African American achievement and how it's hurtful to the community, it's hurtful to persons to have to address this board, though not, you individually, over and over and over, year after year. And if you're familiar with me and my family, you know that my husband used to come up here, meeting after meeting, year after year. And one night he was standing here, and he was totally overcome with emotion, and he started to cry. And the room just went totally quiet, because nobody thought Lloyd Shepherd would ever stand at the mic and cry. And he did, and he said, why do we have to come up here, meeting after meeting, year after year, to beg for what everybody else has? We can see other students progressing, and we don't see that same kind of progress with African American students. So Anya, I just wanted to let you know that the hurt you felt that night was not the first time that hurt had been expressed here. That hurt has been here for a long time. And you aren't alone in your concerns and your cares for the students that aren't achieving. And I just want you to know that I'm hopeful that the things you're doing, equity and the seed, I hope it shows us that have been coming here for 20 plus years that something is truly going to be done. But in the meantime, I just wanted to let you know that you weren't alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay. With that, we will move to the discussion of the opening of schools report. Dr. Warren or Peter, did you want to?
Yeah. In your packet tonight, you have an opening of schools report, as well as an enrollment projections report. These are pretty routine reports that have had a similar format for quite some time. They're put out as a resource for the board and for the community to be able to see what's happening demographically within our schools. So let me just highlight a few details from this year's reports, and then I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have. Overall, our total enrollment as of the end of September was 8,029 students. That's down 37 students from the previous year and within 1% of the projection that we had for the year. That represents a bit of a change. If you look at our history, we've had a growth of about 8 or 9% over the last 5 years. And so this is the second year in a row where we're seeing sort of a flattening of our achievement, or of our student population. In terms of elementary enrollment, a couple of key findings to highlight for you are that when you look at our magnet schools, there's been a decrease of about 5%, or a total of about 50 students over the course of the last 5 years. In comparison, over that same period, there's been an increase of about 8%, or a total of 505 students at our neighborhood elementary schools. So basically, we've seen a small decrease in the population at the magnet schools, and a fairly large increase in the population of our elementary schools. When you look at our projections going forward, they call for a small decrease in enrollment, and that's largely driven by what's happened over the last couple of years. When you look at our historical enrollment projections, we can usually do a fairly decent job of forecasting 1 or 2 years out into the future. Forecasting out 5 years becomes a much more difficult thing to do. And so you can see details about the 5-year projections, but also some of the limitations on that in the report that we've created. Population trends at individual schools don't currently have a significant impact on our planning. By this I mean that we're not seeing huge trends that cause us to believe that we need to open new classrooms or change our enrollment policies, or we're worried about a school being under-enrolled. That having been said, in the most recent year, our biggest population growth was at Nichols, Haven, and Oakton, and our biggest population decreases were at Kingsley, King, and Willard. We also noticed in this most recent year, as you'll see in the report, that the number served with our transportation program has increased significantly. And the number of students who are taking school-age childcare either before and or after school has grown steadily over the last 4 years. Demographically, we do continue to see some shifts in our population. Our Black students now make up 23% of all students, and about 21% of students in kindergarten through 5th grade, whereas our Hispanic population is now 21% of all students and 20% of our K-5 students. So continuing the trend over time, seeing a shrinking of the percentage of our population made up of students who identify as Black, and an increase in the percentage of the population that is made up by students who identify as Latino or Hispanic. You'll note in the opening of schools report that our average class sizes at the district level are all within our guidelines. Average class sizes at the school level are also within guidelines. There were 2 borderline cases this year. One is Orrington, where the kindergarten was much bigger than we had anticipated. There, the average class size as of the end of September was 24.7 students, within our 2 student margin of error that we use. But but larger than our guideline of 23. And at Washington, the first grade average class size was 25.5, so that's half a student over our guideline for first grade. In both cases, we worked with the school administration and the families in the school to ensure that there were adequate resources and that the students could be well served in those classrooms. And I think the last thing I would call out is just that we've noticed there's a bubble in student enrollment. So grades 2 through 6 have the largest class sizes, with smaller class sizes in kindergarten and first grade and in 7th and 8th grade. And so that explains some of the decreasing population forecast that we have, that from year to year, we can expect to see differences. So the current kindergarten and first grade could be an anomaly, and then we could revert to the trend that we've had with larger class sizes, or we may see continued flat or smaller class sizes, in which case we could expect to see a decrease in enrollment. Right now we're at not a historical high, but certainly a historical high within, the last 20 years in terms of our student enrollment. So let me leave it there, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the report.
Okay, thank you. So open it up for questions from board members. Candace?
Thank you, Peter. I have a few questions. The first was related to in the table of contents and then table 4, the number of low-income students. So on the table of contents overview, we show a drop in the number of low-income students from 2865 to 2479. And then when I looked at the associated table that it references, it states that there was an increase. And so I was just trying to understand what table 4 just has from as of October last year, the 3,000 has 3,046 versus. I'm just trying to foot the numbers. Has there been an increase or a decrease?
Yeah, so let me start by talking through table 4, where there are actually 2 different numbers. There's the number of students who qualify for a free reduced priced lunch. You'll see that that number as of October was 2479, and that's a little bit later in the school year, mid to late October, after more applications have come in. Whereas the number of low income was 3,046. The number of students who we would classify as low income includes not only those who qualify for a free reduced price lunch, but also students who are in other categories such as foster care or who are eligible for Medicaid services. So it's 2 different counts. Okay. And I believe that the number that's in the table of contents is the, give me a moment. That's the 2479 number, which is the students who qualify for a free or reduced price lunch, and you can see that that is a decrease from the previous year.
So that's dropped by 400 students, which seems to be a really significant reduction in students in 1 year. So I'm just curious if there's any, if you guys have looked at that and see if there's any kind of other reason than the actual reduction that it might be attributed to in terms of timing of the calculation or anything like that.
So no, we are not aware of any change in the calculation. There was a change between 2014-15 and 2015-16, I believe, which is footnoted there, where there used to be a direct certification by Medicaid where you automatically were enrolled in the free reduced lunch program, and that explained the difference from 3191 in 2014-15 and the 2765 in 2015-16. But there hasn't been any change to the calculation methodology. So I don't know. Nutrition Services has confirmed that the 2479 is correct according to their records, and I'm not aware of any change to the way that those forms were collected this year that would explain that difference.
So I guess the only other comparison was it looked like we were staying even at around 37% based on just the executive summary, and so 36% of students, and I just obviously that number isn't even. And maybe that's, again, the 37% might be even at low income. But then that would say, basically, I don't know what you would infer from that, that effectively we have less kids on free and reduced lunch, but we have as many or more children in the other categories of low income. I just think it's something that we should look a little more deeply into, because it's obviously, something that we need to, we're focused on serving our low income students and making sure that perhaps students in different categories may have very different needs. So if there's a new shift in that balance, we should look at it. So that's just one general kind of area that piqued my interest. And then the other probably relates to, well, the other was the comment you made around increase in transportation in terms of the number of students, and what do we see that being associated with? Reasons for that, more children on buses.
So I'm not entirely sure about what drives that number. We have had some transition over the course of the summer in the staffing for that department. And I know from my own experience, having had staff turnover with magnet applications, that there's a sort of a learning curve. So I don't know whether any of that can be attributed to just new folks managing the department and coming up to speed, or whether there's some actual change in terms of people taking us up on transportation, or I don't have a clear explanation as to what the change is.
Okay. Well, and we can maybe continue that for the finance committee as a follow-up. Do you want to, there was a related memo. We're going to talk about that separately, or if I have a question about that, should I ask it now?
Projections?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and ask it now.
Okay. So my only question around projections then was, I'm surprised that we aren't projecting increases at Walker, again, relative to the TWE expansion and, the potential effect of that TWE expansion on students potentially, returning to home schools with their home neighborhood school, with Walker being the largest feeder to Bessie Rhodes. So just wondered if that was under consideration.
Yeah, so for these projections, we have utilized the existing methodology that we have used previously. So you saw in that section that there's a section about the impact of TWE at Bessie Rhodes. Until we begin to see what applications come in, we won't really know how to account for the change in programming at Bessie Rhodes in terms of our future projections. So the school level projections that you see here are based on an assumption that there's no change to the system based on what's happening at Bessie Rhodes. I don't expect that to be the case. In particular, I would expect that the kindergarten class size at Bessie Rhodes would be closer to the guideline going forward, and that we would likely receive more applications because of the historically large interest in the TWE program.
And so there, if you're using that, then as well, even if other families decided to go out of Bessie Rhodes, if Walker was seeing a net decrease of 30, there would be. That's why, as we've talked before, you think there wouldn't be there would be space or room for those children to come back to their home school if they so chose. So, and on the other hand, I think the one concern is Oakton, where it looks like there's going to be an increase, and that's the second highest number feeder for Bessie Rhodes.
And so I think there's a couple ways that we plan to handle this. One is regular monitoring. And the other is the typical magnet selection process that we have used to balance enrollment in other places. So at this point, we're not under the impression that we will need to do anything other than allow people to return to their home school if they so choose. However, we have a decent amount of space available at King Arts, and the few families who've contacted us so far wondering about their options in terms of next year who are currently at Bessie Rhodes have largely expressed an interest in going to King Arts. they're interested in the K-8 model and they would like to move from one magnet school to the other. So between the space available at home schools and the opportunity to use King Arts, we think we'll be able to manage the enrollment without exceeding class sizes anywhere.
So just going back to the low-income piece, I guess I didn't really frame the question well. I think over the midterm or longer term, obviously it's a concern of the whole board. We retain the diversity, economic diversity, as well as the racial diversity in the district, and just to see if we're staying stagnant at 37% versus it looks like continuing to go down, that we may want to talk about that and talk about the effect that that's having on the experience in our schools. Mm-hmm. So let's try to say it a little bit better than my first time. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
I'm just curious of the students that leave our district, do we ask them why they left?
No, that's usually not part of the exit process. Families typically fill out a form at the school indicating that they're going to leave, and we usually learn from that form something about where they intend to go, but that's the extent of the information that we collect.
Okay, just curious.
I'm wondering, would maybe something maybe this is something we can look at in our joint District 202 and District 65 work is maybe making some comparisons in regards to some of that low-income question, right? So are the numbers in regards to low-income families, dropping at the same rate that we are here in District 65? I mean, I don't know if that's something that we can consider in future work, and then kind of compare notes, right? Just to kind of get at what the issues might be. As we know, Evanston is becoming a very hard place to afford to live in, right? And again, like Camden says, this is a concern for us, and whatever we can do to try to support families being able to stay in Evanston and again maintain that economic and cultural diversity that we treasure. I mean, it's something that we should definitely look at within the district, but also with their colleagues at District 202.
I think also I don't know when the next city schools meeting is, but something to consider
the city as well, yes.
The availability of affordable housing in the city might be affecting those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions over here or comments? I had a couple of questions. One is around the table on early childhood experiences, which I don't know where that was right now. But I know we've historically had pretty high percentage of kindergartners who come in with some form of pre-K experience. It's table 3B. I am wondering, and the vast majority being preschool and daycare center across the board is where the kind of experience they're getting. I'm wondering, is the preschool and the daycare experience similar enough? Why do we lump those two together? And would there be a benefit to separating that out?
We lumped those together because we ran a pilot of questions. So I think 2 years ago we reevaluated our questionnaire, the questions that are used during the enrollment process. And we found that families knew well the name of the center that they had sent their child to, but whether a center was a daycare or whether a center was a preschool, many people evaluated the exact same program as being one or the other. So those terms may mean something different to folks within the early childhood education community, but they didn't necessarily mean something different to the families responding to the questionnaire. So the way that we've handled that in terms of analysis that's deeper than what's in this report is to also ask the families what the name of the center where they got the most of their education, preschool education was, and then how many days a week did they attend that center on average, and then was it a partial day or a full day of service that they received. And so we've worked with the Cradle to Career On Track committee to do some analysis around that. And largely what we found is JEH represents a very large proportion of the preschool and daycare experience for students coming into District 65. And after the several hundred incoming kindergartners who attend that center, the next highest count is something like 30, and the next highest count after that is like 10, and then the next highest count after that is like 2, and kids come from all different kinds of places. So we had originally thought maybe we could do some coding in terms of figuring out which type of program students had, but that turned out not to be the case, at least in I think what you have here is the second year, I think, of data that we've collected in this way. And so now that we're able to analyze 2 years of data, we can begin to make some choices about how we would categorize the data going forward.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my other question was regarding the ACC program, which I know typically has smaller class sizes. And again, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly where I saw this in the report, but I think it indicated that there were 50 applicants, 40 selected, and then I think something like 37 that actually enrolled.
Yeah.
I am curious, why would we turn away anybody who applied?
So we didn't turn away anybody who applied, but we gave people options that were higher on their wish list.
Okay.
So if some folks might have applied, for example, to King Arts and ACC,
got it.
And they indicated that King Arts was their first choice. Okay. So they were given their first choice and they accepted it before we would have offered them the ACC program. So there was nobody who applied for ACC who was turned away. There were just folks who were given an option that was higher on their preference list.
So that means then, so if we say 50 applied and 40 were selected.
Correct.
That means that the gap of 10 were that people got into a different magnet school or program.
That's right.
And then of the selected, the people who enrolled
are the ones who took us up on our offer of attending ACC, as opposed to continuing in their home school.
So we gave them the option and we decided not to.
Right. Okay. So in theory, they would all be selected into it, but it's whether they choose then
Yes.
whether, which program, if they're accepted into multiple programs. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then, you know, this might be a little bit premature. I know in the spring we'll be talking more about enrollment and boundary lines and whatnot, but I thought it was worth pointing out, going back to the table with the kindergarten class sizes, and I know you highlighted a couple that were on the bubble in K and 1, but there do appear to be some others that are pretty high, like the Willard second grade is at 24.7, and there were a couple of others. So I think, you know, just as a preface to our conversation in the spring, I think it would be worth having some historical information on, because it seems to me that anecdotally, from what I remember, that there are schools, in Washington being one of them, that typically do have some of the larger bubbles, that always have the larger class sizes. So I think having that information to be able to understand what the historical patterns have been would be helpful.
We can certainly share that. I think that my experience of managing this over the last 4 years has been that kindergarten is typically the place where we're managing class sizes, because it's the place where we have the least knowledge about what to expect. And that each year that I've been doing this, it's been a different school. This year it was Orrington, previous years it's been Dewey, Washington, and Lincoln. So we could certainly bring that to the table. And there are some class sizes, as you point out, that are higher, but they're all within the guidelines that we have. So we can do some more analysis, but based on what I have seen in the data so far, I'm not really aware of a particular school where enrollment is a concern, but it's definitely something we'll look into as we design what that process is going to be.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this or comments?
When does the district typically start reaching out to find out who the kindergartners are going to be? I haven't seen any explicit language, anything, unless I'm not reading it. Kind of like, you know, call your school and put your name on a list so that we know who they are. Like, I have an incoming kindergartner, but...
Yeah, so we actually begin our registration process each year in January. This year, I think it's the last week in January that we have information nights for families at each of the neighborhood elementary schools. And then in the same week, we have one night where there's a Bessie Rhodes information night and a King Arts information night. And then this year, I think it's the third week in February, we have an information fair here at JEH, where we have an information fair in the lobby with different tables with information, and then we have sessions that repeat themselves 3 times each night in English and 1 time each night in Spanish, where folks can get information on things like applying for a magnet school, or what the ACC program is all about, or what the TWI program is all about. And then the very last week in February is when we start our kindergarten registration. We have 4 days that week where we try to get as many people as possible through the process, and then we continue to accept applications through or registration forms through the opening of school. But typically we get about 80 to 90% of our registrations in by the time school is out.
Is there any outreach that could be done? I'm thinking that those site meetings would be great, so that people can at least get to their neighborhood school and hear about, you know, the school, the offering, and whatnot. But I'm worried that the hype of those, the outreach for those events gets to people who can't plan to be there, and then there's nothing for them after that.
Yeah, so our communications department typically is the one who does a lot of outreach on that. And over the last couple of years, we've also looked at like what are the channels that we should be going through other than our typical communication channels to make sure that the information is received across all different parts of our community, that there's an element of accessibility for Spanish speakers. And so Melissa will again plan that this year. And so that's typically how we go about that.
Always in the works, yeah.
And it is fair to say that our communication department is Melissa. It's one person.
Yes.
Thanks for all the charts, Peter.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for all the charts. Thanks for all the charts, Peter.
I love it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. With that, I adjourn the working board meeting at 8:13. We will turn this over for finance.
Great. So at 8:14, we'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Could we have a roll call, please, Adela?
Ms. Cohen?
Here.
Tanya Booty?
Here.
Chow?
Here. So we have 4 action items, and then, and that's it, actually. Should be pretty quick. So the first action item relates to our minutes. I'll read the motion, and you all can second and ask questions if there are any. The Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the November 6, 2017 Board Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented.
Second.
Any changes or comments to the minutes? No? Okay. You take a roll call?
Cohen?
Yes.
Tanya Booty?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes. Motion carried, 3-0. Our second action item relates to our FY19 transportation fees. I can turn it over to Raphael. I think the short answer is we're not looking at an increase in fees. But did either you, Raphael or Kathy, do you want to say anything? Okay.
Yeah, we're looking at a small increase for transportation fee for our magnet students and magnet students and students in special programs, TWI, English speaking, and ACC. Previously, we were discussing an increase in number of students being transported. We actually are observing that increase in that population. We have about 100 more students that we are transporting this year, about 714 students, and we are spending, and I'm referring right now to attachment B. In our packet, we're spending about $570,000 on transporting these students. We only receive about $27,000 from the state, and that's actually 100%, that's 4 payments. So if one of these payments is missed, we will receive even less money. The majority of the paying students are full paying students, 122. And we also we are expecting 45 reduced fee students. And we can charge, we are charging those students per board policy. Our policy states that we can charge 2/3 of the cost, which is $767 per student. We can charge to our full fee students, and reduced price amount will be $153. So that's the long answer. It is 3%, about 3%, which reflects the increase in prices. And our transportation manager, Lou Gata, is here, so he can answer questions about why we have more students. I personally do not know why the numbers are so much higher in comparison to last year, but they are higher.
Yeah, if you want to come up.
Yeah, do you want to, you can come up to the podium or sit down or whatever you want.
So this is Lou Gata, who's our manager of transportation.
So Lou, can you speak to the increase in number of students or relative to past years? Do you have any idea why?
In terms of past years, no. I mean, my answer was I hope from the beginning of the year, I want to always encourage students to ride, because I do think it is a great learning and social environment when it's done well. So I was hoping that would be part of the reason, that taking the bus doesn't have to be, a negative thing. It's actually, it could be a very positive thing. But in terms of some of the other programs, I know when I was coming in, there was a lot of discrepancy on whether or not TWE students were going to be transported, even if they were not going to their resident school, but were under 1.5 miles. They were not going to get transportation, but it didn't seem to be communicated very well. And so when I came in, and some of these students are obviously, well, they're all in the TWE program and some of these other programs, so I wanted to make sure that because it didn't seem to be clear cut, to make sure that all of these students in these programs were offered transportation. So that was before I came on. But there seemed to be some uncertainty there, and not to mention that there seems to be a growth in the programs as well. So I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. Part of the issue I think Lou is addressing is that for students who need TWE services, we have one of two options. If they have it in their home school, they can go to their home school, but if the home school, there's overcrowding in their home school, and they can stay in their home school and not get the services, or they can go somewhere else and we provide transportation to them. So what we try to do is encourage them to go to where they will get the services, even if it involves us providing transportation to them. That's a big part of that, of the increase in population.
So, but I hear you guys saying two different things, because Bussy Roads does not have the TWE program currently. It wouldn't have affected that. That relates to, making a decision around busing, letting kids go to not to their home or less than a mile and a half versus the TWE program. So do we?
What I'm saying is that's part of it. That is part of it, because we are at the beginning of the school year. We had family who wanted to attend. They are one of two choices. They can stay in their home school and not get transportation, but they wouldn't get the services they need, right? Or they can go somewhere else where they will get the services and will provide them transportation. There was some of that going on.
Yes, and there is every year. Right. We have that.
And there seems to be an increased number of that, at least this year. So we made the decision that, for educational reason, allow them to go where they will get the services. And in that case, we incur more charges by providing them transportation. That was one of the variables that we saw this year.
But that's how we've done it.
That's we've always done it.
We've always done, correct? That's not a change.
But what we found out, and I don't know what happened in previous years, is there were some families who were saying that they will not offer transportation in prior years. I don't know how accurate that is, but that was the narrative that we got. We just got on the transportation bandwagon here in the district this year. So what we're trying to do what we thought was education as the best option for the kids.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the request would be, for going forward is to try to figure out this 100 increase and what the reasons are, because there has been a long-standing policy, and sounds like it wasn't communicated well, and I remember there were some parents last year who communicated with us with regards to after-school programs, particularly from Bessie Rhodes, and not having buses or having buses for King Arts, and it was lack of clarity. So I applaud you guys for wanting to offer more services. I think we do have to be clear across the board what is our policy, and then are we applying that fairly and equitably, to all of our schools? So just
the variable is this, Madam Chairman, is the fact that we did not do such a good job with change management when we wanted to change some things this year to provide less transportation to folks. We got pushback from parents who said, I didn't know this when I was planning the school year. So what we did, we defer to customer service in saying that we will provide you with transportation this year, even though based on the direction that we were going, they may not have been eligible for it. But since they didn't make the plan to be able to transport their kids, we decided to allow them.
Correct.
So those are some of the variables that I'm sharing with you that may have led to an increase in ridership this year.
Okay. But that wouldn't have changed from last year.
Right,
then.
that would have been families who had been relying on bus service, and so we're continuing to get it, not new riders, correct?
Yes. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. All I'm communicating to you is what we found when we got here. And we had no one to actually check with. So we made the decision based on eligibility, who was eligible. And if there was a gray area, we defaulted to providing transportation because we thought that was the best decision to make.
We can clarify, starting with the policy, what we're doing and how we're doing it and where the numbers line up. It sounds from my colleagues that what we've been also doing is where we've been, by policy, offering services, we may not have been communicating that over the years, and some people have now, in a good sense, taken advantage of that.
Right.
Not taking advantage, but they've actually taken what should be provided them, and we can double check that. I do want to hold a little placeholder that as we think about the next 3, 4, 5 years of budgeting, we may want to look at transportation as a place to find cost savings. And so these questions are really helpful for us to gear up to make sure that if we have a policy, are we implementing it? And then if we have to change that policy, we need to come before the Finance Committee and the board. And then we have to, as Raphael says, we have to work on change management because we want to be able to communicate to our parents that we may be executing a different set of policies over the years to both find cost efficiencies and to be within both the letter of the law and what makes most sense.
Yeah, and I think everyone here would concur that we want to plan and inform people and communicate as far in advance. It's not fair to parents to, at the last minute, say something that they have assumed to be true for many years is all of a sudden changed. So absolutely understand that. Just 100 extra children is a lot of kids, and it does lead to significant costs, given we're only getting $27,000 out of $700,000 from the state. So we just have to be, if that's a general trend, we've got to be cognizant of that because it will lead to, cost adjustments for us going forward.
You're absolutely right. Not everyone, I don't think everyone who's riding the bus right now, if we had communicated ahead of time, should be riding the bus. But since we didn't manage the process well, we didn't want to start World War II, to be frank, or World War III. So we decided we're going to take the time next time around to communicate ahead of time so parents can make their plans in the coming years. So if you're not eligible for a bus, we set out the criteria, we communicate it to you, and you can make plans during the summer before school starts.
And I think we'd probably want to look at those too, again, to make sure there isn't bias or disproportionality or other factors that are, unintended consequences of those policies as we make the decision, right?
And just to be fair, it's kind of you to say you didn't manage the process well, but you came on in midsummer and you came on in later summer, so our team has been doing the best of the, really nice work, really rapid fire fast.
And I did, just to add to it, the whole 1.5, I think everybody knows that number, but that I think some families, especially in some of the programs, were that, I'm under 1.5, and they may not have known, well, I'm in the TWE program since I'm going to a different school, and that's what we were, especially to certain programs like this, we wanted to make sure, no, this is eligible, so I think some of the increase came from that too. They knew the 1.5, but didn't know the differences in the programs that may be eligible for it.
And there were folks who weren't provided transportation last year who made the case that they should have been eligible for transportation this year. Since we had really no standard to use, we just err on the side of customer service. So we'll provide you transportation until we come up with firm rules, and we'll communicate those rules. And so you wouldn't come back again and say, I didn't know this. So we did what was necessary to provide good customer service.
Understood. Thank you.
So, to echo Candace's point about making the changes, notifying parents as soon as possible. And I don't know if this is requiring, we're talking about the policy language. I don't know if we actually need a policy change or if this is from a couple of years ago when we were talking about changing the hazards, if that's what it's related to. But in either case, I think the sooner we can communicate, especially if these are families who have typically over years been eligible for bus service if they won't be. We just need to make sure we're communicating that well in advance.
And in addition to, the rules are if you live within 1.5, you shouldn't have to be bused to school unless you live in a hazardous area. But some of the issues that we'll get in this year were folks who on paper didn't qualify for transportation and didn't technically live in a hazardous area. The parents will call, they'll say, I live in a certain part of town, and I don't feel that my kids are safe being able to walk from there for whatever reason, and we have to listen to their case and make a decision what to do for them. But I think what would be helpful is if we have a firm policy that says, for example, you live in a designated hazardous route, or you don't, and if you don't live in a designated hazardous route and you live within 1.5, then you don't get bus transportation.
That isn't what our policy currently says?
It is, but he's saying that they gave allowances for folks who felt, we determine though what constitutes hazardous. Right? I mean, there's the legal definition of hazardous, and I would say there's other definitions of hazardous. So there have been times in the past, I believe there's hazard areas may be safety related,
So the designation is actually correct. The designation is actually done by the Illinois Department of Transportation, and we go based on that. But I think what the issue is that as a board, you have to be firm in saying that you either abide by that and there will be no exception. Because if we make exception for one, what happens is the word gets around and it opens the floodgate, and we have to keep making exception because they will say, you made one for my neighbor who lives down the street from me, why won't you make it for me?
But
so
students,
those are part of the issue.
Students with IEPs also qualify for transportation, and we pay per bus route, not per student that rides the bus, correct?
Right.
So there's a whole additional layer of complexity that goes into this.
But with student with IEP, that is a known fact, that if you have an IEP and your IEP calls for you to be transported, you get transported regardless of where you live.
So if there's a student with an IEP on block 1 and a student with an IEP on block 2, and there's 20 other kids that could also be transported to the same school that's 1.4 miles away, there's not a lot of benefit in excluding those other 18 community members from benefiting from the bus.
Except it's not that simple. Depending on the IEP of those students, Some students can ride in a general bus. Some students cannot, based on their particular need. So on paper, we can say they live in the same area, they should be able to ride in the same buses, but it depends on what their particular needs are. They may not be able to. So we've run into some of that, where on paper they should, but because of their particular need, it's just not going to.
And then you have the issue too, from a flexibility standpoint, there might be 18 kids today, there might be 30 next, that changes over time when you're dealing with
My point is really that it's not just a simple cut and dry suggestion to just be firm to parents that they can't receive the services, and that there is always going to be this gray area that exists with the busing, and that we need to be able to account for that and plan for that.
At the risk of sounding callous, the problem with gray area is it gets grayer as you go on. Because then my story is just as compelling as the next story, Before you know it becomes a floodgate. So if we really are thinking about controlling the cost of transportation, we have to have a policy and we have to apply it across the board.
And I would add too that the cost is having to hear each case by case. That's time and resources that are taken to actually go through that process too. It's not just the
without a doubt.
cost
And
of
then the
busing.
moral hazard of saying that this person's story is worse than this other person's story. Right. I don't want to be put in that position because everyone can tell you a story.
Of course.
That is so.
So my suggestion, as it has been for the past, I think, 3 years, even though I've only been on the board for 6 months, would be to not just make a hatchet decision and cut off about who is able to ride the bus, but try to find a way to serve as many students as possible for as low cost as possible. So I think that Dr. Smilowitz has been working with the administration on a grant provided by Northwestern, or funded by, sorry, I don't know who it's funded by, but it's not funded by our district, to try to find a solution in which the most number of students can benefit, as opposed to just trying to create this very bright line of who qualifies and who doesn't.
And that's what we try to do this year.
Right, that's right. Right.
But it's not sustainable, quite frankly, without additional source of revenue. Because the problem is we used to get much more money from the state.
Sure.
And the amount that we get for transportation now is unconscionable. Where we used to get close to 50%, we'd be lucky if we got 10% from the state.
At the risk
cost keeps going up.
At the risk of sounding more callous than you, we do need a line somewhere, because at the end of the day, it is not the district's job to get every child to school. We need parents who can also arrange for their children to get to school. And there's lots of family structures, there's lots of needs. But children start somewhere else at the beginning of every day, and we need help in that process. And without the line, people don't know when they have to plan to either get their kid to a stop or to a school or to a carpool or whatever the arrangement is. And
so my question is, where does this conversation,
go?
Is this a policy committee conversation that we need to approach?
We have transportation policy, so I think if we bring the policy as it is, but we also need to know whatever practices support that, it should probably go to the next policy, or the policy meeting. And
that will depend also on the analytics that we do to be able to determine what, given the current policy, what happens and how much does that cost, and given any changes of policy, what happens and how does that cost. And then we combine it with Karen Smilowitz, who's the professor of engineering and transportation at Northwestern, who's helping us look at different routing schemes and different ways of doing our stops, which we'll have to work on change management, but her charge, and she's doing this pro bono actually, although they just got some National Science Foundation resources to help out, but her charge is to find an efficient system at minimal cost while still doing what we have to do within our policy. So we've got sort of 3 things going on simultaneously.
So 2 questions come to mind then for me is, one is I feel like before it gets to the policy committee, ensuring that some kind of equity lens has been applied to it so that we can expedite the conversation, given that information needs to go out to parents as quickly as possible if standards are changing. And then 2, I think our next policy committee is in February. Is that So that's not a whole lot of time. That's not even really enough time to even let incoming kindergarten families know if there's some kind of policy change. So just being cognizant that we're already short on time in terms of analyzing this and getting information out. And that'll be a part of the change management for next year. But it'll certainly be more time than you had this year, right, to address those questions.
And I appreciate that. And it starts with the fundamental question that people ask, which is why did we increase by 100? So we can at least
needing
answer
to
that.
know that.
And know that within the context of the policy, and then we can figure out what, we'll make a strong recommendation, and it will be recommended based on cost efficiencies and serving our community, but cost efficiencies, because we've got to find cost efficiencies in our budget that go, because 80% of our costs are people, so where we can find cost efficiencies that frankly aren't people, that's all for the better if we can do that well. And so that's the journey we're on.
Okay.
So I just had a quick comment. So one of the questions, so that would emerge out of, let's say we run this through an equity lens, right? And it was mentioned earlier, is like, so there may be folks who can navigate the system and get the services they need for their kids, and we have families who can't or don't know how. And I think one of you mentioned that, again, there might have been some families, maybe in the TWEET program, for instance, who did not realize that they qualified for these services. So as we do that analysis, I'd like, that would be something that I'd like to find out, like which families maybe didn't take advantage of this, even when it was communicated from the district that they qualify for the services, but because they maybe couldn't read the language or what have you, maybe they missed the letter. How many missed out, right?
A lot of it, I think, was coming from the TWEET program, because in the beginning of the year when we would, like you said, because we wanted to make sure, excuse me, that anybody that was eligible, especially in these programs, would have service. And when I would send out a message that then, once they were routed to everybody, there was a lot of people from TWEET and others that were like, oh, I will take the busing. And like I said, I think because they just thought the 1.5, but some of that early in the year communication did bring more riders, especially in those programs.
And can I ask, so again, being a guy who has a family that goes to neighborhood school, we walk like 3 blocks and it's great, but I don't understand how, so I mean, clarify for me how qualification for travel or for busing is communicated? Is it sent out via email? Is there a paper? Is it translated?
Oh yeah, we send out to all riders translated English and Spanish.
Okay. Is it an email, paper, snail mail? Or
No,
is it just
it's been primarily just, again, for cost. It's in the beginning, I was sending out one for pretty much every week because there were a lot of changes happening.
Got it. Okay.
And then follow-up phone calls, then emails that would come straight to the transportation department that would communicate that way. So a lot of
different ways,
different angles that we were communicating.
Okay,
for sure.
Okay, so we can address the policy piece later. What I'm hearing is this discussion around policy is less about changing the policy and probably more about clarifying if this is for sure the policy we want, and then what practice are we going to use to actually be adherent to that policy. So it may not be as drastic of a change, but we can channel that discussion to the...
With one caveat, that if Professor Smilowitz comes in with recommendations as she's doing the work over time, we may have some changes in policy, but we don't know.
Right, but do you expect those before February? Or?
Yes, the goal was to try to get something by January.
Okay. So then that would be for the channel to the February policy meeting.
And certainly with costs, what you were talking about, increased costs, and then also costs relating to after-school programs as well would probably need to be addressed at some point too, because there's a lot that are not eligible for busing, but then we do bus them to a number of the different after-school programs, not District 65.
And we've discussed that several times in the past at both policy and finance, and so worthy of coming up again.
We're also heading into a contract negotiation on bids for transportation next year, correct?
We have an option of an additional year without doing a bid, an additional year option. But I think what it really boils down to, the board, whatever the board decide as far as what the policy is, what the application of the policy, we will carry it out.
Yeah.
But we just made the decision this year, there were too many unknown to serve the students and worry about it subsequent years.
Just to be clear, the busing policy of 1.5 miles being the threshold, that's a board policy, it's not.
It's a board policy, but it is based on state law.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we get no money from the state for transportation, so it doesn't really.
Not only do we get we get minimal money, then when these were actually executed, we got a lot more money. So we get a lot less, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we currently exceed the state guidelines relative to our busing for hazards as well.
The way technically how the state reimburses is, if the kids live less than 1.5 miles, we really don't get anything. We get absolutely nothing. So whatever expenditures that we incur, we eat it. Now if the kids travel between 1.5 miles, but it's a designated hazardous route based on the Department of Transportation and affirmed by this board, then we get some level of reimbursement for that. If the kids live beyond 1.5 miles, then we get some level of reimbursement for that.
But we do busing less than 1.5 with a hazard that has no reimbursement.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So related to the actual fees, did I read the motion? Okay. Forget at this point. All right. If we don't have any other questions on the actual fees, then let's go ahead and take the vote for the increase in fees. Did we have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Cohen?
Yes.
Tanya Brady?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes. Motion carries 3-0. So our next agenda item is related to student fees. And this is where I was misspeaking. So, and that's page 8 in your packet, which looks like there's a recommendation to maintain student fees. Am I reading it correctly for everything?
Kathy,
there would be no increase.
Maintaining student fees?
Yes, so another fee that we're discussing tonight is the general student fee and activity fee. Currently, we charge $95 for general fee and $35 and $45 for class activity fee. We are proposing no increase for next year because both fees were increased last year, and technology fee was increased 2 years ago. And also in light of recent referendum, we understand that there was financial pressure on our families. We do not want to exacerbate this. So we would like to keep the fees the same next year.
Great. So I'm going to read the motion, and then if we have any questions. Finance Committee recommends that the student fees proposed to remain constant in fiscal year 19 be presented to the full board for approval. Sorry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions about it? Hearing none.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Cohen?
Yes.
Tanya Brady?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes. Motion carries 3-0. Thank you, and thank you for that. And then our last action item is our FY19 budget calendar, which outlines the process and timeline schedule for development of the FY19 budget. The Finance Committee recommends that the draft calendar for preparation of the fiscal year 2018-19 budget be presented to the full board for adoption. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there questions? Did you want to preface anything around the calendar, Raphael or Kathy?
Well, I can't believe we just approved the FY18 budget, and
Yeah,
here we are
feels
talking
like
about
time
the
is just
next budget.
flying.
We are required by the policy to approve this calendar. We will be starting our work very soon. We started already, actually, and financial projections will be presented to the board and to the finance committee next month. We are doing additional things, Rafael and I, this year. We working, as promised, we are working on a version of priority budgeting. We will continue zero-based budgeting for non-personnel programs and expenditures, and we will continue to improve our documents so they're even more transparent. Sometime this spring, the board will receive another short document from us about prior year, just a one-pager. So that's a new thing related to our financial health. And of course, we will be presenting the state of our referendum reserves. Again, as promised, by resolution to our community and to the board, we will be bringing these updates frequently.
Great, thank
so
you.
Stay tuned.
Any questions about the calendar? Nope, okay. Want to vote?
Cohen?
Yes.
Anyabody?
Yes.
Chow?
Yes, motion carries 3-0. So our next meeting is January 16th. There were several FYIs, and if there are questions related to that, you can certainly talk to the team.
I just wanted
yeah.
I forgot to mention in our previous meeting, so, but that, just to call the public's attention to the memo regarding the staffing to support students of color. That was a part of the working board FYI agenda. I think it's a really important, and especially in lieu of the equity update that we're discussing and conversations that are coming up, that folks know that that's there. So.
Great, thank you, Anya. So if there's no more business to come before the committee, I find this meeting adjourned at 8:48 p.m.
Sounds good.
Adjourned. Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.